Are the KE4s the new benchmark at around $200? No, but they are one of my favorites, right up there with the CKLVX and the PULA. And if you crank them up, you can make the argument for being a benchmark, but at mid volume they are a very smooth, relaxing, and warm leaning IEM, perfect for like chilling and just like non-fatiguing listening, as the vocals are more laid back with a good sense of space and note weight. But again, the real magic happens once you crank these up, because the KE4 also scales very well, not quite Explorer levels of like volume, but just as immersive, and it's how I would recommend them to be listened to. The upper mids and treble that were more pushed back at mid volume now moves closer without being like in your face and shouty and fatiguing. You just hear the details better in both the upper mids and the treble now as you crank up the volume. And the bass also gets thumpier, it becomes more prominent, it's a little bit more forward now, it hits deeper. And normally once you crank up the volume, everything becomes, more forward because of the scaling, and usually that's where the issues happen with some vocal fatigue or like treble sharpness and sibilance. But because there's a scoop at 1K, this pushes the vocals back and gives the KE4 like a sense of distance, which means that the vocals aren't up in your face, you're not going to get that fatiguing sense of like sensation, but they also still feel extended enough because of the 3K boost that's also less than Harman, which means that you still get the extension but just not as shouty as some find the Harman 3K to be. So what ends up happening is that the vocals are non-fatiguing but still extended and open at higher volumes. However, the vocals still aren't necessarily perfect, because if you're looking for more power and intensity and you want to feel that deep vibrato, then that's where the KE4 falls short on, because even though the vocals are extended with good enough note weight, they can feel a bit weak and not like super powerful like the RS5, since in order to strike that balance at both mid and higher volumes, some trade-off needs to happen, and in this case it's in the power department. But the good news is the dual isobaric dynamic drivers give the KE4 one of the best low end under $200 just when it comes to like the texture, the impact, and the note weight. It makes the overall tuning sound full and grounded and doesn't feel like overly airy or light, and kick drums especially hits very deep, followed by a nice rumble in the sub bass. The separation and imaging is also good in the low end, and overall just it's what expected at its price. But when you compare it to some planars or some more like technical sets, it's not quite as fast in the transients and like the sharpness in the imaging. It's still a solid performer, but in terms of like pure detailed retrieval and technical prowess, both the SUPERMIX4 and the CANTA and the Quintet will be better value in that sense. It just gives you more detail, and although the trade-off is in return for this like slower pacing, you do get like better slam, you get heavier note weight, and just a more natural timbre. And personally, I would take the KE4's bass over something like the 2024 S12 that is evidently quicker but not as enjoyable because of the timbre, and it feels a bit light compared to the KE4's. Treble wise, the KE4's are pretty balanced and good overall. It's not exciting or doesn't jump out. It's not gonna be like a treble headset, but it's also not dark or hidden in the background, so it strikes a nice balance in the treble, and there's no timbre issues when it comes to the BAs. It's not overly airy, not overly sizzly, and you're not gonna get that like planar or like PZT timbre to it. It just does the job. It's a solid treble. Now versus the Quintet and the Orchestra LITE, both of those will have better detail, imaging, and separation, and just overall more technical when it comes to like the performance side of things versus the KE4. If you want the cleanest set, the Orchestra LITE is going to be the most neutral of the bunch. It's vanilla and balanced, very inoffensive in its tuning if that's your vibe. The low end on the Orchestra LITE can feel a bit soft. It's not nearly as good as the KE4s, but they are more complete when it comes to the vocals. It has better extension in the 1K, and overall just feels more like traditional in the vocals because it's not scooped. And even the cheaper CANTA is more detailed when it comes to the treble, but both the CANTA and the Quintet have a little bit of that planar timbre to them and not as natural timbre wise versus the KE4s. If you're looking for the best all-rounder set, the Quintet will still be like the best pick. It's the most balanced, it follows a more traditional like tuning, and it has the most detail, but it does have a little bit of that planar timbre and metallic keenness to it. But if you're looking for the best low end but still fairly balanced, then the KE4s would be the best in that regards. It has the best texture, the best slam, the best note weight, it hits the deepest, and overall it's the most musical out of the three, and it's the most enjoyable to me, as well as it scales a lot more, it becomes more immersive. But I will say, if you listen at mid volume, then the other three Kiwi ears are going to be the better pick, and more well-rounded and more detailed. Now versus the SUPERMIX4, these two are total opposites. The SM4 is cleaner, it's quicker when it comes to the low end decay and the attack. The vocals are more forward, it's a little bit more sharp in the transients, and overall like more lively and airy when it comes to the overall presentation. At mid volume, the SM4 is going to be the better pick. It's more all-rounded, it's literally Harman, right? You get more micro details and resolution with the SM4. And when it comes to the overall balance, the SM4 is the better pick. The vocals are more forward, they're not as pushed back and laid back versus the KE4s. However, if you want a fuller sound and are open to like cranking up the volume knob, then the KE4 is much more immersive in my opinion. It's heavier, it has better texture in the low end is deeper, slams harder, and the tuning is just quote unquote more unique and special. But speaking of a special tuning, we gotta talk about the CKLVX and the PULA. Compared to those two, the KE4 is actually fairly similar when it comes to the vocal presentation. All three lack a bit of power. They're kind of like tamer on the vocal side of things, but still well extended enough, and it's not shouty, with the main difference being that the KE4 just isn't as airy and light when it comes to the transients as the CKLVX and the PULAs. The KE4 doesn't have that dreamy, airy feeling as the CKLVX, but instead it's more grounded with more depth, and it's more natural in that sense when it comes to the timbre, less sharp, less peaky, and smoother overall. Basically, if you found the CKLVX or the PULA to be a little bit too airy and sometimes a bit sharp and peaky in the treble, then the KE4 fixes that with a much smoother presentation, better textured bass, thumpier, deeper slam, and more natural when it comes to the timbre. Because tech-wise, all three are around the same, meaning they're decent but nothing crazy like the SUPERMIX4 or the Quintet at its price. And tuning-wise, they're equally as good to me, and switches depending on my mood. So it really depends on what your preferences are, more airy or more grounded. Then lastly, some of you guys have been asking for an Explorer at mid volume, and the KE4s are pretty much that. It has more air, the vocals are a little bit more extended and open when it comes to like mid volume, and the bass is a little bit better. So overall, I think at mid volume these are a better pick over the Explorer, but the Explorer will still be more intimate. It scales better in its presentation. The vocals are going to be closer. It's hard to say which one I like better because the Explorer is just like a different kind of sound. It's more like intimate and personal, whereas the KE4 has more air, it has more boost in the treble, and it makes the stage feel like more open, as well as the 1K region is scooped, which pushes the vocals back more, and on top of the extra treble air, it creates like a bigger sense of like distance and space versus the Explorer. But I know some people prefer the gradual rise in the vocal region around 1K more on the Explorer, so I don't know, like it really depends on your preference. But overall, like in terms of technicalities, KE4s are going to be a step up, and the bass is going to be a noticeable step up. It's better texture, it has extra dynamic driver, it sounds a bit deeper, and it's just like an overall better technical sets versus the Explorer. However, it doesn't mean the Explorer is outdated. I think it still has its place if you want something more intimate, more personal, something even smoother than the KE4s, which the KE4s are already pretty smooth, I think. Then you would go for the Explorer. But aside from that, I think the KE4s are going to be a solid upgrade over the Explorer for most people. It's less neutral, more bassy, still very immersive, and a bump in the technical aspects. So yeah, a very solid release from Kiwi. It's kind of cool how the sound changes just by adjusting the volume a bit, and I do dig these a lot, and I recommend cranking these up if you are getting them. But aside from that, I hope this review was helpful. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see everyone in the next one. Shout out to Rark's Cat, Dom Q, Star Buccaneers, This Call Scaldus, B_Urac, Mystic Spoon Attack, Oh Really, Walker Standard, User Ernest, Patrick, Belcel Kel, Polly J, Mr. Gorillas, Anton Risto, Gis Seng Yan, Tamat Pat Fache, Ed Dunlap, Christopher Jackson, Name, Henry Claudia, Son of a Horse, 777ZK, Ben Thompson, Franco Gomez, Haigu55, Asher, Wizard, Jab, Obi, iComment87, Contain Guava Juice Gains, and Treble Well Extended. Thank you guys so much.